Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tearing into a case that completely shattered the illusion of safety in a quiet Tokyo suburb. We're looking at a devastating, absolute mystery that went down right at the tail end of the year 2000, literally on the cusp of the new millennium. It's a story that's going to challenge everything we think we know about modern criminal investigations. Because as you'll see, the problem here wasn't a lack of clues, it was a baffling, mind-boggling abundance of them.
Right off the bat, let's look at this number. 12,545. That is the exact number of physical pieces of evidence collected by investigators at this crime scene. I mean, we're talking about a killer who abandoned his weapons, his clothes, his DNA. He basically left a giant neon sign pointing to his entire physical profile for the world to see. And yet, he just vanished. Like a ghost. To really wrap your head around how crazy this is, just listen to this quote from Takeshi Toshida. He was the former chief of the local Seijo police station, the guy who actually led the investigation. He said, and I quote, "It looked like they had been tortured for fun. In all my years as an officer, I have never seen a case with more evidence." That really sets the tone, doesn't it? It perfectly captures the mounting dread and just the completely baffling nature of what we're about to unpack.
All right, part one, the Setagaya quadruple homicide.
So to understand this crime, we really have to picture the setting. December 30th, 2000. We're in a quiet, affluent neighborhood in Tokyo's Setagaya ward, looking at the home of the Miyazawa family. Now this house was right next to a public park, separated by just a high fence. It was a totally serene environment, which is a horrifying contrast to what was about to happen. But before we get into all the forensic data, we have to remember the human beings at the center of this. The victims were Mikio, a 44-year-old consultant, his wife Yasuko, 41, who ran a tutoring school right out of the house, their 8-year-old daughter Nina, and their 6-year-old son Rei. Just a typical, well-liked family settling in for the night after doing some New Year's shopping. Let's look at how this nightmare actually unfolded.
Investigators managed to piece together a pretty chilling timeline. At 10:38 p.m., Mikio checked a password-protected business email, so we know for sure the family was awake and secure inside. Then, right around 11:30 p.m., the killer gets in. The evidence shows he actually climbed that park fence at the back of the property, shimmied up, and went through an open second-floor bathroom window. So he totally bypassed the locked doors downstairs. But get this, by 1:18 a.m., the killer is literally sitting at the family's computer browsing the internet. I mean, that alone tells you something deeply unsettling about his state of mind. And tragically, it wasn't until 10:40 the next morning that Yasuko's mother, who lived right next door, got worried, went over, and found them.
The actual sequence of the attacks? It was chaotic, but horrifyingly methodical at the same time. Step 1, the killer goes into the bedroom right next to his entry point, and he strangles 6-year-old Rei in his sleep, just bare hands. Rei was actually the only victim strangled. Step 2, he confronts the dad, Mikio, on the stairs, stabbing him with a sashimi knife he'd brought along. It was such a violent struggle that the tip of the blade snapped off inside Mikio's skull. But then, the killer does something absolutely chilling. His weapon is broken, right? So he casually walks down to the family's kitchen, grabs one of their own everyday santoku knives, walks back upstairs, and brutally attacks Yasuko and Nina. And what's absolutely heartbreaking is that criminologists found Yasuko's body draped over Nina. She was in a desperate, protective posture right to the very end.
Moving on to Section 2, bizarre post-crime behavior. Now this is where this guy's profile goes completely off the rails from almost any known precedent. Normally, someone commits a crime like this and they run into the night, right? Not this guy. He stayed. He lingered in that house with his victims for anywhere from 2 to 10 hours. And what he did during that time is just a surreal string of bizarre, self-soothing behaviors. He raids the fridge. He eats 4 cups of ice cream and a melon. Drinks 4 bottles of barley tea. Like we said, he gets on their computer, snooping through personal folders, even trying to buy theater tickets. He uses the upstairs toilet and doesn't even bother to flush. But interestingly, there were 10 cans of beer in the fridge and he didn't touch a single one, which strongly suggests he didn't drink alcohol. It all points to this sickening lack of urgency. He was treating a horrific crime scene like a hotel room.
But the real key to understanding this guy is in the micro details. For instance, investigators didn't find any dirty spoons. Why? Because the killer had literally squeezed the ice cream out from the bottom of the cups directly into his mouth. And during that initial fight with Mikio, he'd managed to severely cut up his own hands. So he just wanders around, finds the family's first aid kit, and bandages himself up. He even used female sanitary pads to pack his wounds, leaving bloody handprints smeared all over the refrigerator door. I mean, let that erratic psychology really sink in for a second. It shows a complete and utter detachment from the extreme violence he had just committed in the next room.
Okay, Section 3, a mountain of forensics. Because he made himself at home for hours, investigators walked into an absolute goldmine of physical data. Biologically, they had his type A blood, perfect fingerprints, and yes, his unflushed feces, which, by the way, told them exactly what his last meal was, stuff like string beans and sesame seeds. Then there's the clothing. He leaves behind this highly specific outfit, a limited edition Schlesinger sweater, a Uniqlo jacket, and a bucket hat. Listen to this. He actually took off his own blood-soaked clothes, folded them up neatly, and changed into clothes belonging to Mikio before he walked out the door. He also ditched a hip bag, like a fanny pack, and some handkerchiefs that absolutely reeked of Drakkar Noir cologne. It is almost unheard of for a killer to just shed their entire physical identity at a scene like this.
But out of everything he left, this one detail is probably the most mind-bending. Deep inside the pockets of that hip bag, investigators found trace amounts of microscopic sand. They analyze it, and guess what? It's not from Tokyo. The mineral makeup traces back to the western United States, specifically the desert area around Edwards Air Force Base in California. Talk about expanding the scope of the mystery. Did he buy the bag at a thrift store? Does he have some military connection? Is he an international traveler? It instantly blew the case wide open, globally, creating avenues of investigation that they are quite literally still untangling today.
Which brings us to Section 4, profiling the unknown suspect.
So, because he bled all over the house, the police had flawless DNA samples, and that DNA gave them a wildly specific genetic footprint. It points to a young male, probably of a slender build, with mixed ancestry. The paternal side shows a marker that's common in East Asian populations. You see it in about 1 in 13 Japanese folks, 1 in 10 Chinese, and 1 in 5 Koreans. But then, his maternal line traced back to Southern European or Mediterranean descent, likely somewhere around the Adriatic Sea. For a criminal profile, that is ridiculously specific. In theory, having a mixed-race profile that distinct should make narrowing down your suspect pool so much easier.
But here's the kicker, and the reason why this hasn't been solved overnight. There's a massive legal roadblock. While they had this amazing DNA profile, it didn't match anyone currently in Japan's criminal databases. And Japan has incredibly strict personal information laws. As of right now, those laws strictly prohibit the police from taking that DNA and running it through international modern forensic genealogy databases. This is absolutely crucial to understand because forensic genealogy, that's the exact tool being used right now to bust wide open, decades-old cold cases all over the US and Europe. The science is totally there, sitting right on the table, but the legal framework currently stops them from using their most powerful weapon.
Let's look at Section 5, an enduring unsolved mystery.
So it's been 25 years, but do not mistake this for some dusty, forgotten file shoved in a basement. Right now, there's an active reward of 20 million yen. That's one of the highest rewards in the history of Japan for case-breaking info. In fact, the absolute public outrage and the relentless media coverage of this specific case changed the country forever. Largely because of the Setagaya murders, Japan abolished its statute of limitations for capital crimes back in 2010. What that means is the police will literally never have to stop hunting this guy. The books are open permanently.
And the task force? They are relentless. They're still using highly modernized tactics today. For example, exactly 100 days after the murders, this mysterious Buddhist Jizo statue was left near the scene. They're still analyzing it, trying to trace its specific carving style to different stonemasons across Japan. They've also utilized advanced 3D printing to build exact physical models of the house to train new detectives and run spatial simulations of the struggle. And those Schlesinger sweaters? Only 130 were sold in Tokyo around that time. They are still painstakingly trying to track down every single buyer. They are literally pulling every obscure, time-consuming thread they can find. Which ultimately brings us to our final thought, the absolute glaring paradox of the Setagaya case. How in the world does a killer leave behind his clothes, his murder weapons, his fingerprints, trace sand from across the globe, and his literal DNA, and yet remain an absolute ghost in the modern world? It's a question that has haunted a peaceful Tokyo suburb for decades now, and until someone out there makes that one vital connection, it's going to continue to haunt us all. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep wondering and stay curious.
Every case has a story. See you in the next investigation.